All right, graphing logs, the last video of 2.3. So we already talked about the basics, that it is the inverse of exponential. So if I were to graph just ln of x, it's going to look something like this. I have a couple of options to graph ln of x. I could use my calculator. I could graph e to the x and then make the inverse. I could make an xy table. Any of those things would work, but I would realize that there's an asymptote here. So remember, vertical line is x equals, and it's the axis, so that's 0. Means that it's never going to touch 0. So even if it got really close, it's not actually going to touch 0. Okay. It's going to cross the x-axis at 1, 0 because the inverse would cross the y-axis at 0, 1. If you don't know that, you graph it on the calculator and you leave it at that. No big deal. Okay. For the analysis, we're going to look at the domain. We're going to look at the range. We're going to talk about some other words. And we're going to also state that, hey, since we've already talked about it, we're going to write it again over here. The asymptote is at x equals 0. Okay, so the domain, how wide is it? Notice that there is nothing over here, right? So the domain is not all real numbers. The domain starts at 0, but then goes right forever. So 0 to infinity. Does it ever touch 0? Well, no, because that's an asymptote, so it is a parenthesis. It does, however, go down forever and up forever. So that is negative infinity to infinity. Okay. That was x equals 0. I just somehow didn't get the 0 there. All right. Do notice that it is continuous. So remember, continuous means it goes on forever and ever and ever. Notice it does not have any symmetry. So it's not even, it's not odd. It has no relative min or max. So we say no extremas, that just no min or max. No, it's because it's going negative infinity to infinity. This one, maybe we specify that it is a vertical asymptote, not a horizontal. It is unbounded because it's going up and down forever. So just bringing all those vocabulary words back into play there. And then hopefully this part is easy as all get out, because I feel like we have transformed so many times. We've done it already once this year. You did it at least 5, if not 6 times last year in Algebra 2. So if there's a plus sign grouped with the x, that means to go left 2. Okay. So instead of crossing at 1, 0, it's now going to cross at negative 1, 0. Instead of that vertical asymptote being at x equals 0, it's now going to be at x equals negative 2. And so it's going to look like this. Same graph, moved left 2. Okay. This one is a little more complicated because we have to think of it as switched around. That means I have a negative out front of the x, so it's going to reflect across the y. You're going to think that it goes left 3 because it's a plus sign. However, If I factor that negative out front, I'm actually left with x minus 3, which means it goes right 3. So reflect across y-axis and moves right 3. Okay, so my vertical asymptote was at x equals 0. That means it's now going to be at x equals 3 because it moved right 3. To reflect across the y-axis means instead of doing like this, it's going to do like this. Okay, so that's going to put me at 2, 0. Still going to get real close to that asymptote, but not actually touch it. Okay. The 3 out front is still a stretch factor of 3. It still has the same vertical asymptote of x equals 0 because it is not shifting left or right. If it shifts up or down, it also does not, but we'll get there. Still starts at 1, 0. But now our next point is up here, so kind of like 10, 3. So instead of being more looped, it kind of goes up more. If you want a more accurate picture of the graph, feel free to put it in Desmos. All right, so if the number's on the outside, that means to go up. I know we're used to having +1 at the very end. We typically, not always, but typically don't like to put that at the end because then we get confused. Is that connected to the log x? So is it with the parentheses or with it, or is it not? We're not sure. So to keep that question kind of out of the idea there, we like to just put it in the front. So if I had -1 plus log x, that would be down 1. Okay. So same x vertical asymptote, x equals 0. But instead of 1, 0 as my point, I now have 1, 1 as my point. That 1, 0 went up 1. Okay. All right. That concludes your notes. The last piece of your part is a scavenger hunt. It's similar to the piecewise. In my opinion, it's easier to follow than the piecewise function one was. I also hope that the questions are easier too. There are 1 or 2 of them that I give you a hint above the picture, so make sure that you are reading the words as well when you try that scavenger hunt.